A witness is now describing in excruciating detail Donald Trump's apparently enthusiastic historic use of the N-word. The quote, N-words. I recall him saying disgustedly, look what the N-words did. I don't even like this version of it, by the way. And we obviously cleaned it up for YouTube, but that is Fred Trump writing that, describing Donald Trump in a racist outburst. So this is coming in a book, All in the Family, The Trumps and How We Got This Way. It's his nephew who was with him, spent a lot of time with him and saw him do this. And so in response to this coming out, we do have to give you a disclaimer, a response, I guess, from the Trump campaign. Trump's spokesperson, Stephen Chung, who I believe is legally and constitutionally not allowed to say anything true, called the account in the book completely fabricated and total fake news of the highest order. And so if the use of fake news doesn't already tell you that this isn't honest, it goes on to say, anyone who knows President Trump knows he would never use such language, and false stories like this have been thoroughly debunked. Yeah, right. Anyway, so here is the actual account. So this is back in the 1970s. So this is Fred Trump talking about being at the house of his grandparents. This is the parents of Donald Trump, who I'm sure were just swell people. And he says it was just a normal afternoon for preteen me. Then his uncle arrived. Donald was peed. Boy, was he peed. Trump says his uncle showed him his, I don't even know, that's a particular type of white Cadillac Eldorado. I don't know, fancy white, I guess, convertible. In its retractable canvas top, quote, there was a giant gash at least 2 feet long and another shorter gash next to it. So the car had been disfigured, which would be annoying, I'm sure, and people react to that. Well, here's how Donald Trump allegedly reacted to it with the quote that we showed you before. N-words, look at what the N-words did. And Fred says, I knew this was a bad word. His uncle, importantly, had not seen whoever damaged his car. Instead, he saw the damage, then went straight to the place where people's minds sometimes go when they face a fresh affront across the racial divide. So I want to be very clear. If he had seen who'd done it, that wouldn't make it cool, but he hadn't. He just saw that it was damaged and he was like, you know what? I bet it was someone of a different race that did this, and instantly he filled in the gaps. If something bad happened, it's clearly those people that did it. And I'm gonna now rant in an incredibly explicitly racist fashion in front of my family about how mad I am at them.
A storm is tearing up the digital media industry. Only our audience can save us in these difficult times. Help us reach our goal of 100,000 new members at tyt.com/team.
And so we're gonna get to arguably worse stuff from the book, but Yaz, again, I'm not surprised by this. We all know that this is a thing that he's thrown around in private. People from The Apprentice have talked about it. This is just another incident with another eyewitness to it.
Yeah, so the claims in the book, it's hearsay, and there's no real way to fact check any of these particular claims, but the claims certainly are corroborated by other similar claims that have made about Donald Trump, not just during his time as president or as a candidate, but even during his time as a reality TV star. We just heard about how he allegedly used the N-word when he was talking about Kwame in the season 1 finale of The Apprentice. And we also know that he has a history of fighting against Black people, against their rights, trying to get them locked up or put in jail or on the death penalty or whatever. So this story is actually interesting for me, though, not because Trump allegedly said the N-word, because again, that's not surprising, but because it talks about the perception of normalcy. And in the passage, this is Fred Trump III. It's Trump's nephew, his brother Fred's son, and Mary Trump's brother. And he talks about, like, this was normal for me to see him, and he would just be, ranting about something, saying the N-word. We all have an idea of what is normal for us in our lives, and we assume that what is normal for us is normal for everyone, and that's simply not the case, right? It also was a different time, which he does acknowledge. Fred Trump does acknowledge in the passage that it was a different time. Maybe Trump grew up around people who just said the word and didn't think anything of it, which is very true. Yeah. And these things do lessen as the years go by with each generation. But at the same time, it's not like Trump has proven that he's learned, that he's better than he was back then. It's not like he's not still going out trying to attack Kamala Harris now. This really is going to be a big challenge for him because he has a woman and a woman of color who he has to now run a race against. And he has a documented history of misogyny and racism, not just in his speech, but also in his actions. So if that was Trump back then, that would be one thing. But the fact that it's still Trump today, that says a whole lot more. And no, it's not normal. I'm gonna say that my version of normalcy here is that racism to that extent is not normal, or it shouldn't be at the very least.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I want to say, like, there's all of the obvious reasons that a person being a racist is bad. I'm sure you can fill in many of them. But one that I don't think gets focused on enough is what it represents. It is a form of your brain being broken. You cannot accurately interpret new information because you have all of these ways that you can't even help that this is how you see people. And it's not like Donald Trump in the 70s used the N-word and then he was really cool. When the Central Park 5 happened, he wanted their heads. They weren't guilty, but he couldn't see it because his brain was broken. And so he publicly called for them to be murdered by the state. When the first black president gets elected, he goes on a multi-year crusade to get the guy's birth certificate because his brain is broken and he cannot conceive of someone with a darker skin tone being legitimately able to be president. It's not just about them offending people or saying something naughty. It reveals a far deeper psychological and emotional failing of theirs, a weakness that they have neither the ability nor the desire to actually move past. And I want to turn now to another failing revealed in the book. Fred Trump says, called Donald Trump after seeing him at Briarcliff, a family golf club in Westchester County. He says he described his son's needs. So he had a son, his son had a lot of health problems, it was very expensive. They weren't sure what would end up happening with his son. There were increasing costs for his care and some blowback from Trump's siblings. So he says Donald took a second as if he was thinking about the whole situation. I don't know, he finally said, letting out a sigh. He doesn't recognize you. Maybe you should just let him die and move down to Florida. To which Fred writes, wait, what did he just say? That my son doesn't recognize me? That I should just let him die? Did he really just say that? That I should let my son die so I could move down to Florida? Really? And apparently, really, at least according to Fred Trump, that's what happened. And that was not the only time that Donald Trump expressed these sorts of thoughts, that people that are in a difficult medical situation, maybe a costly medical situation, maybe should just be finished off. So Fred said he should have been surprised. He had recently heard his uncle say something similar in an Oval Office meeting with doctors and advocates for disabled rights. At that meeting, which was in 2020, Trump, quote, sounded interested and even concerned, Fred writes. I thought he'd been touched by what the doctors and advocates in the meeting had just shared about their journey with their patients and their own family members, but I was wrong. Those people, the shape they're in, all the expenses, maybe those kinds of people should just die. That's what Donald Trump's nephew says. Donald Trump said after hearing from people who deal with these situations. His takeaway was, well, it's expensive. Why don't we just kill them? He's a sociopath. He just doesn't see other people's lives as being in any way as valuable as his own. That is just true of him. It has always been true of him. He doesn't have the capacity to extend empathy to anyone other than maybe Ivanka, briefly, and that is even enough to stop some of the things that he said and wanted to do to her. So, Yaz, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, it's all very uncomfortable. I hate it. But it kind of goes back to the racism thing. And it's like what you were saying. I've always said that if someone is a racist, I just know that they're not very intelligent for all the reasons that you actually just said. I don't care how much Ivy League education they've got under their belt. They're not intelligent people and I don't respect them. And to your other point, I was just talking to somebody about this, which is kind of random, but we were talking about Alabama and Mississippi, which here in Texas, they're right over there, right? And they consistently rank in the bottom of so many metrics across the country, education, healthcare, whatever. And a big part of that, I feel, is probably racism. Like racism is very regressive. It doesn't allow for any kind of progress. You're cutting out an entire chunk of the population and discarding them as if they don't matter. And then what you end up with is you get a place like Alabama and Mississippi. It's just a complete, entire lack of empathy. And as what did you say? Their brain is broken, or it's missing chunks of brain, right?
Yeah.
They're just unable to access certain parts of their brain, and they're feeling. And whenever you look at people and you just see a price tag on them, that says a whole lot about you. And yeah, like it's diagnosable. It has to be. That's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not like how your brain is supposed to function. How did he
I
get this
agree.
way?
Don't know. Could be family, could be, nature versus nurture. I'm not sure. I just know that this is the way he is, and apparently he's been this way for literally decades.
We'll never know
And
how we
also-
got this way, but it's our problem now.
Yeah. And I love the idea that those states are just they're just over here. That is funny.
There.
They are close. When you click the join button and become a tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?